It was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. But as the music played and guests whispered in excitement, Elena Smith felt a cold, suffocating weight pressing down on her chest. Today was the day she'd say, "I do," to the man she thought she knew, but nothing could have prepared her for the nightmare that was about to unfold. At his wedding, billionaire Daniel Johnson, the man who had promised to love and protect her, betrayed her in the cruelest way imaginable. In front of a room full of guests, Elena's world shattered with one painful slap. The guests froze, eyes wide with shock, as Elena stood there, trembling and gasping for air. Her mind raced, not knowing whether it was the sting of the slap or the crushing realization that the man she loved had become a stranger in front of her eyes. Her vision blurred as tears welled up. This wasn't just a moment of physical pain. It was a betrayal that cut deeper than any wound. The wedding guests stood there in stunned silence, some whispering, some recording the moment on their phones. This was the moment that would define her future. As the music continued to play in the background, Elena's thoughts raced. How could he do this to her? How could the man she trusted with her heart betray her so completely? She looked around, searching for someone, anyone, to help her, but the eyes around her were cold and uninterested, as though her pain was a mere spectacle for their entertainment. But Elena was stronger than she appeared. She had been through hell before, a childhood marked by hardship, a life filled with struggle. And as the seconds ticked by, she knew one thing for sure: she would not let this man destroy her. With shaky hands she pulled her phone from her bag, her heart pounding as she opened the video camera. As Daniel turned to walk away, oblivious to the camera, Elena captured the moment. The footage would be her weapon, her voice in a room that was suddenly filled with the sound of silence and judgment. Little did Daniel know, this was not the end for him. This was only the beginning of his downfall. Elena's father, a billionaire in his own right, had always taught her one thing: never back down from a fight. As Elena's eyes locked with her father's, sitting quietly in the back of the room, a silent understanding passed between them. Her father had seen the footage. He knew exactly what happened. And he would make sure the world knew it too. Later that evening, the footage spread like wildfire. People began to talk, to share, and to ask how a man who appeared so perfect could do something so horrific. Elena sat quietly in the back of the car, her heart racing, knowing that the storm was just beginning. But one thing was certain: she would never let him get away with this. No one would. Her father would make sure of it. And in the coming days, Daniel would learn just how much power a woman scorned, and a father determined to protect his daughter, could have. Elena would rise from this, stronger than ever. And Daniel? His empire would crumble, just like the trust he had destroyed. But for now, all Elena could do was hold her breath, knowing the battle was far from over. Elena sat silently in the back of the car, her phone still clutched in her hand. The footage of Daniel's betrayal, the slap that echoed through the grand ballroom, replayed in her mind. She could still feel the sting on her cheek, the coldness of his touch, but it wasn't just the physical pain that haunted her. It was the realization that her life, the life she had carefully built with him, had been a lie. As the car sped down the road, the bright lights of the city flashing by, Elena's thoughts raced. She had been so blinded by love, by the promises he made, and now, it all felt like a cruel joke. But she wouldn't let it break her. She couldn't. The pain was fresh, raw, but she had been through worse. She remembered the nights growing up, when she had to fight for everything she had, everything she wanted. This was just another battle, and she wasn't about to lose. When the car finally came to a stop, Elena stepped out, her mind still whirling. The silence of the night was deafening, but she could feel the weight of the moment pressing on her. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew she had to act fast. Her father had seen the footage. He knew the truth. And he wasn't going to let Daniel get away with this. Elena had always admired her father's power, his unwavering strength, and now she needed it more than ever. She walked into the house, the place that once felt like a home, but now, it was just another reminder of the life she had lost. Her father was sitting in the study, his back to the door. When Elena entered, he turned around slowly, his eyes meeting hers. She didn't need to say anything. He already knew. Without a word, he reached for his phone, his fingers moving swiftly over the screen. Elena watched him, knowing that whatever came next would be nothing short of a storm. Her father had the power to ruin Daniel, to strip him of everything he had. And that was exactly what he was going to do. It wasn't about revenge, not entirely. It was about justice, about making sure that no one ever thought they could get away with treating people like Elena had been treated. Elena couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope as she watched her father work. He was doing what he did best, using his power to right a wrong. He had built an empire, and now, he was going to bring Daniel to his knees. Elena didn't know what the future held, but for the first time that night, she felt a sense of control. She wasn't the victim anymore. She was the one who held the power, the one who would decide how her story ended. The phone in her hand buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was a message from her lawyer. The wheels were already in motion. Elena took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the situation settle in her chest. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for the future she deserved. And Daniel? He would never know what hit him. Elena stood at the window of her father's study, looking out at the city lights below. The cold, sterile feeling of the room seemed to reflect the emptiness inside her. The sting of betrayal was still fresh, but it was no longer the only thing she felt. Anger, determination, and a sense of power began to take root inside her. She wasn't just going to be a victim in this story. This was her story now. She turned away from the window and walked over to her father's desk, where he sat, still absorbed in the phone call. The quiet hum of his phone echoed in the room. She didn't have to hear the words. She knew what was happening. The wheels were already in motion. Her father had his connections, his influence, and he was using it all to make sure Daniel paid for what he had done. Elena couldn't help but feel a flicker of satisfaction as she watched him work. She had always admired her father's ability to get things done, to bend the world to his will, but now, it was her turn. Her father finally hung up the phone and looked at her. His eyes were filled with the kind of determination that only a man like him could possess. "It's done," he said simply, his voice steady and calm. "You don't need to worry about him anymore." Elena nodded, though part of her was still uncertain. It felt like the calm before the storm. She knew that Daniel wouldn't give up easily. But she wasn't afraid of him. Not anymore. "What happens now?" Elena asked, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. Her father leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the wooden surface. "Now we make sure he understands what it means to cross the line. He's about to lose everything, his reputation, his wealth, his place in the world. And he will never be able to undo what he's done." Elena swallowed hard. The weight of the situation was beginning to settle on her shoulders, but she didn't shy away from it. She had lived through too much to back down now. The truth had been exposed, and there was no turning back. "What about me?" Elena asked quietly. "What happens to me?" Her father's expression softened, but only for a moment. "You move forward. You rebuild. You take control of your own future, Elena. This is your chance to show the world who you really are. And I'll be here, every step of the way, to make sure you get what you deserve." Elena's eyes met her father's, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of hope. She wasn't just a wife, a victim. She was a force to be reckoned with. She had the strength to rise above this. And with her father's support, there was nothing she couldn't do. The next few days felt like a blur. The media frenzy exploded as news of Daniel's betrayal and the footage of the incident spread. Elena's name was on every headline, but it wasn't just because of the scandal. It was because people were starting to take notice of her. She wasn't just the woman who had been wronged, she was the woman who was about to take control of her own destiny. The world was watching, and she was ready to show them what she was capable of. Daniel, on the other hand, was spiraling. His empire, built on lies and manipulation, was crumbling before his eyes. The footage had sealed his fate. And with his reputation in ruins, the once powerful man was now nothing more than a cautionary tale. Elena sat in her father's office, looking out at the city again. This time, she wasn't looking for answers. She was looking forward. The future was hers to shape. And she was ready to take the first step. Elena sat in her father's office, her fingers drumming lightly on the wooden desk. The world outside seemed to move at a pace that felt too fast, but inside, everything felt suspended in time. She had been through so much in the last few days, the betrayal, the exposure, the fallout, but as she sat there now, the weight of it all was finally sinking in. Her father's empire, the one that had been built on years of hard work and determination, was at her disposal. She wasn't just a bystander anymore. She was a player in this world, and it was her time to make her move. Her father had always said that power was something that could be claimed, not just inherited. Elena had seen that power in action, felt it in the way her father controlled the room, the way people listened when he spoke. And now, she was ready to use it for herself. The phone on her father's desk buzzed, breaking her thoughts. She picked it up and listened as her lawyer spoke, the words confirming what she already knew. Daniel's empire was falling apart. The damage was done. His reputation was in tatters, and there was no coming back from the scandal. Elena couldn't help but feel a small, quiet sense of satisfaction. This wasn't about revenge, at least. Not for her. It was about justice. It was about making sure that no one ever treated her, or anyone else, like she was disposable. She had been wrong, but now, the tables had turned. It was time to take control. Elena had spent her life being the quiet one, the one who stood by while others made the decisions. But not anymore. She was no longer just Daniel's wife. She was Elena Smith, a woman who would fight for what she deserved. Her father's influence was a powerful tool, but it was her own strength that would carry her forward. She had already taken the first step by not backing down, by not allowing herself to be a victim. And now, she was going to keep moving forward, step by step, until she had everything she wanted. The phone buzzed again, this time with a message from one of her father's financial advisors. They had already begun the process of taking back the assets that Daniel had stolen from her, the properties, the investments, the company shares. Everything was being returned to her. It was more than just money. It was a symbol of the power she was claiming. Elena didn't need to prove anything to anyone, least of all Daniel. But she knew that the world was watching. People were seeing her strength, her resolve, and that was all that mattered now. She stood up from the desk, her mind made up. It was time to move forward. Time to build the life she had always dreamed of, but this time, on her own terms. The storm had passed, and Elena was no longer just a victim of circumstance. She was a force to be reckoned with. And Daniel? He had no idea what he had set in motion. He thought he could break her, but all he had done was ignite a fire that would burn brighter than ever before. Elena walked out of the office, her father's empire now in her hands, and for the first time in a long while, she felt like she was finally in control of her destiny. Elena stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing out at the city below. The night was still, the only sound coming from the faint hum of the city lights. The weight of the past few days seemed to hang in the air, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of peace. Everything was falling into place. Daniel's empire was crumbling, and Elena was no longer the woman she used to be. She wasn't the woman who had waited silently for her husband's approval, the woman who had stayed in the background while he basked in the spotlight. She was Elena Smith, and she was ready to take on the world. As the days passed, the fallout from Daniel's actions continued to escalate. The media couldn't get enough of the scandal, and every day, there were new headlines, new details of his downfall. But through it all, Elena remained calm, steady. She had seen it all before, the way people turned on those who had once been untouchable. The once mighty millionaire was now a cautionary tale. Elena wasn't interested in watching him fall. She had already moved on. The focus was now on her, on what she would do next. She had a future to build, a legacy to create. Elena's father had always told her that power wasn't just about wealth or influence. It was about being in control of your own destiny. And now, Elena was ready to do just that. She spent her days meeting with her legal team, overseeing the recovery of her assets, and working with advisors to take over the reins of the companies she had inherited. Her vision was clear. She wasn't just going to rebuild her life. She was going to create something bigger, something that would stand on its own. But the road ahead wasn't without challenges. There were still people who didn't believe she could do it, still whispers behind closed doors that questioned whether a woman could truly take control of such a vast empire. Elena didn't care about the doubters. She had already proven that she could survive. Now, it was time to thrive. One afternoon, as she sat in a meeting with her financial advisors, Elena received a call. It was from one of her father's closest business partners, a man who had always been a part of their inner circle. "Elena," the voice on the other end said, "I know things have been moving fast, but you need to be careful. There are some people who won't let you take control so easily. They might be trying to use Daniel's downfall to get to you." Elena's eyes narrowed as she listened. She wasn't naive. She knew that there would be people who would try to take advantage of the situation, people who would see her as an obstacle to their own power. But she wasn't afraid. "I'll handle it," she said calmly. "No one will take what's mine." She hung up the phone and sat back in her chair, a sense of resolve washing over her. The world was watching, but Elena wasn't interested in playing by their rules. She was going to create her own. As the weeks went by, Elena took control of her new life, making decisions that would shape her future. She expanded her businesses, formed new alliances, and proved to everyone that she was more than capable of leading. It wasn't easy. There were moments when the pressure seemed overwhelming, when the weight of her responsibilities felt too much to bear. But Elena had learned to thrive under pressure. She knew that every obstacle was just another opportunity to show the world what she was made of. And as she stood in front of her father's office, looking out at the city once more, Elena knew one thing for sure: she had only just begun. She had claimed her power, and now, nothing would stop her. The days blended together in a blur of meetings, decisions, and endless calls. Elena had stepped into a role she never imagined for herself, but now, it felt like it was meant to be. Every morning she woke up with a new sense of purpose. Her father's empire was hers to command, but the weight of the responsibility was not lost on her. Yet, for all the pressure, she was more alive than she had ever been. She had not only fought back from betrayal, but she had emerged stronger, taking control of her future with an unshakable determination. Her mornings were filled with strategy sessions and financial reviews. Elena had quickly gained a reputation for her sharp mind and no-nonsense approach. The business world was watching, waiting to see if she would crumble under the weight of it all. But Elena wasn't the kind of woman to buckle under pressure. She had been through too much to let anyone or anything stand in her way. She was becoming a force to be reckoned with, not just in business, but in every aspect of her life. That afternoon, she sat in her office, reviewing the latest reports on the companies she had taken over. The deals were stacking up, and her father's empire was expanding under her leadership. Elena had already secured several high-profile partnerships, the kind of deals that would make her competitors take notice. But it wasn't just about making money. It was about making a statement. She was building something that would last, something that would outlive the scandal, outlive Daniel, and outlive every doubt anyone had ever had about her. As she read over the final draft of a new business proposal, her phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was from her lawyer. "Elena, there's something you need to know," her lawyer said, his voice steady but urgent. "Daniel's team is planning a counterattack. They're going after your assets, trying to claim parts of the companies that rightfully belong to you. They won't go down without a fight." Elena's hand tightened around the phone, but her voice remained calm. "I'm not surprised," she replied. "Let them come. I'm not backing down. Not now. Not ever." She hung up the phone and stood up, walking over to the window. The city below was a maze of lights and movement, but in that moment, Elena felt as though she could see everything. The world had thrown its worst at her, and she had come out stronger. She wasn't going to let anyone take that from her. The battle wasn't over. But Elena had something now that she hadn't had before, a clear vision for her future. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was a leader, a woman who would stop at nothing to make her mark. As the days passed, the pressure continued to mount. Daniel's legal team threw everything they had at her. They tried to twist the truth, use legal loopholes to strip her of her power. But Elena stood firm. She had something they didn't have, an unshakable sense of purpose. And with every legal document, every court appearance, Elena proved to herself and the world that she was untouchable. One evening, as she sat in her office reviewing a new contract, Elena's phone rang again. This time, it was a call from her father. "Elena," he said, his voice calm but filled with pride. "You've done well. The world is watching, and they're starting to realize just how powerful you are. You've shown them that you're not just your husband's wife. You're Elena Smith. And nothing can stop you now." Elena smiled softly, feeling the weight of his words settle deep in her chest. She had done it. She had taken control, not just of her own destiny, but of her father's legacy. The world had underestimated her. They thought she was just a woman scorned, a victim of betrayal. But Elena was no victim. She was a woman who had risen from the ashes, stronger and more determined than ever. And now, the world would know her name, not as the wife of a millionaire, but as a woman who had built an empire of her own. Elena sat at her desk, staring out the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The last few weeks had been a whirlwind, a constant battle, but she had emerged victorious. Daniel's legal team had been relentless, throwing every tactic they could at her, but nothing had stopped her. With each court session, with every piece of evidence she presented, she had proven that she wasn't just a woman wronged, she was a force to be reckoned with. Her father's empire was thriving under her leadership, her vision was taking shape, and she was beginning to realize just how far she had come. But as the days passed, Elena found herself at a crossroads. She had rebuilt everything she had lost, but now, the weight of responsibility weighed heavily on her. The power she had claimed was intoxicating, but she wasn't sure if it was enough. Her mind kept returning to one thought: what did she truly want out of all this? Was it the power, the wealth, the legacy? Or was it something deeper, something more personal? She had always been driven by the desire to prove herself, to show the world she wasn't just some trophy wife. But now, with everything falling into place, she realized there was more to it than just proving people wrong. Elena's phone buzzed, breaking her thoughts. It was a message from her father. "Elena, come by the office tonight. We need to talk." Her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't seen him in a few days, busy with her own plans and meetings, but the tone of his message made her nervous. She grabbed her coat and made her way out of the office, her thoughts swirling as she headed to the car. When she arrived at her father's office, the building was quiet. She made her way up to the penthouse suite, where her father was waiting for her. His face was unreadable, but she could see the weight in his eyes. He motioned for her to sit. "I've been watching the way things have been unfolding," he said slowly, his voice steady but filled with an intensity that caught Elena's attention. "You've done everything I expected and more. You've shown the world that you are more than capable of handling this empire. But I think it's time for you to think about what's next." Elena frowned. "What do you mean?" "I've already secured everything. I've taken control." "Yes, you've done that," her father said, leaning forward. "But there's more to life than just business, Elena. You've spent so long fighting for control, for validation. It's time to think about what you truly want." Elena's chest tightened. She had always known her father had high expectations of her, but this conversation felt different. It was as if he was finally acknowledging something she had been avoiding, the part of her life that wasn't about the empire, the part that wasn't about power or revenge. "What are you trying to say?" Elena asked, her voice quiet. "I'm saying that it's time for you to find peace," her father said softly. "You've been carrying this weight for so long, And now it's time to let go of the anger, the hurt, and the need to prove yourself. You've already won. Elena stared at him, the truth of his words settling in her chest. She had spent so long fighting, so long proving that she was strong enough, that she hadn't stopped to ask herself why. She had won. She had built an empire, taken control of her destiny, but at what cost? Her father was right. It was time to move forward, not with vengeance or anger, but with purpose. She had everything she needed: power, wealth, influence. But now, she needed to figure out what it all meant for her. For the first time in a long time, Elena felt a sense of clarity. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. It was time to focus on what truly mattered. She smiled softly at her father. "Thank you," she said quietly. He nodded, his expression softening. "You've already proven who you are. Now, it's time to show the world who you want to be." Elena stood up, a new sense of resolve filling her. She wasn't just going to lead her father's empire, she was going to shape her own future, on her own terms. The battle had ended, and now, it was time for Elena to start living her life, not as a woman defined by her past, but as a woman who was finally free to choose her own path. Elena's days had become a blur of decision-making, business meetings, and strategy. Yet, for all the success she had found, there was still something missing, something she couldn't quite place. Despite the empire she had inherited, despite the revenge she had taken, she realized that the hardest battle was not with Daniel, or his empire. It was with herself. She had conquered so much, but there was still a part of her that longed for something deeper than just power and wealth. Her thoughts kept returning to the quiet moments with her father's wisdom, the words that had lingered in her mind. It's time to find peace. Could she do that? Could she let go of the anger and prove to herself that there was more to life than this? One evening, as she walked into her father's office, she noticed a change in the air. The usual sense of urgency and sharp focus had softened. Her father sat at his desk, a calm smile on his face as he looked at her. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his voice warm. Elena hesitated. She had become so accustomed to holding it all together, to pushing herself forward at all costs. But now, she was tired. Not physically, but emotionally. She had built an empire, but she still felt a void. "I'm doing well," she said, though she knew deep down that it wasn't entirely true. "But sometimes I wonder if it's enough. I've won the battle, but what comes next?" Her father leaned back in his chair, his eyes thoughtful. "The battle never really ends, Elena. It's about what you choose to do with your success. What you choose to become." Elena's eyes widened. She had always thought success was about winning, about proving her worth, about showing the world what she was capable of. But now, she was beginning to see that there was more to it than that. "So, what should I do?" she asked softly, unsure if she would like the answer. Her father smiled gently. "It's not about what you should do. It's about what feels right to you. The world will always be there, pushing you to prove yourself. But you have to choose your own path." Elena sat in silence, the weight of his words settling in. She had spent so long fighting for control, for validation, that she had lost sight of what she truly wanted. She realized that it wasn't just about building an empire or getting revenge on those who wronged her. It was about building a life that brought her peace. "I think I need a break," she said, the realization dawning on her. "I've spent so much time focusing on the future that I forgot to live in the present." Her father nodded, as if he had been waiting for her to come to this conclusion. "Take the time you need. You've earned it. But remember, success isn't measured by what you achieve, it's measured by the life you create for yourself." Elena left her father's office that evening feeling lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel the pressure to be someone she wasn't. She had already accomplished more than most could ever dream of, but now, it was time to focus on the life she truly wanted. It wasn't about being perfect, about being the woman everyone expected her to be. It was about finding peace within herself. As Elena walked through the city streets that night, the lights twinkling around her, she realized that the world had already seen her strength. Now, it was time to see what she could build when she wasn't fighting against herself. The next chapter of her life was just beginning, and this time, it was hers to write. As the weeks passed, Elena found herself at a crossroads. She had accomplished so much in such a short period, building her father's empire and making her mark in the business world. But now, with everything in place, she began to question what came next. The power, the wealth, the control, none of it felt as fulfilling as she had imagined. It was as if she had been so focused on the destination that she had lost sight of the journey. One evening, while sitting at her desk in her new office, Elena felt a sense of unease. The office, sleek and modern, was filled with the hum of technology and the buzz of ongoing projects. Yet, the emptiness she had been pushing aside was slowly creeping in. She thought about her life, about the choices she had made, and wondered if she had sacrificed too much along the way. Was this really what she wanted? She had always believed that success was the answer, that if she could build something meaningful, if she could make her father proud, then she would find happiness. But now, it didn't feel that way. Elena's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a knock on the door. It was her assistant, Sarah, with the latest updates on some ongoing negotiations. Elena gave a small nod, motioning for Sarah to come in. As Sarah placed the files on the desk, she noticed the somber look on Elena's face. "Everything okay?" she asked gently. Elena paused for a moment before responding. "I've been thinking a lot lately," she said quietly, "about what I really want. I've built this empire, but it feels like something is missing." Sarah tilted her head, considering her words carefully. "You've done amazing things, Elena. You've taken control of everything. But maybe it's time to step back and think about what you really want out of life. It's not all about business, is it?" Elena smiled faintly, appreciating the wisdom in Sarah's words. She had been so focused on proving herself that she had forgotten to ask herself why. Why had she worked so hard? Why had she fought so fiercely? "You're right," Elena said softly. "I've been running on autopilot, trying to fix everything, trying to prove I'm worthy. But I need to figure out what really matters to me." As the night wore on, Elena made a decision. She would take a step back from the constant whirlwind of business and spend time rediscovering herself. It wasn't about letting go of the empire she had built, it was about finding balance, about reconnecting with the parts of herself that had been buried under the weight of her success. The next few days were filled with quiet reflection. Elena spent time with friends she hadn't seen in years, reconnecting with the woman she had been before everything changed. She visited places that brought her peace, things she had long ago stopped making time for. As the days passed, Elena began to realize that she didn't need to choose between success and happiness. She could have both. But she had to redefine what success meant to her. It wasn't just about the empire, the wealth, or the power. It was about living a life that felt true to her, that allowed her to thrive not just professionally, but personally as well. One afternoon, Elena sat on a bench in the park, watching the world go by. The weight of her decisions, the pressure to keep moving forward, had eased. She felt lighter, more at peace. For the first time in a long time, she could see a future that wasn't defined by what others expected of her, but by what she wanted for herself. The world had already seen Elena's strength, her resilience. Now, it was time for her to live for herself. She had built her empire, and she had fought for her place in the world. But now, it was time to find a life that was about more than just winning. It was time to find her own happiness. Elena woke up to a quiet morning, the sunlight filtering through the blinds, casting soft patterns on the floor. It was the kind of morning she had been craving, calm, peaceful, and free from the constant demands of the empire she had built. As she stretched and sat up, she realized that the changes she had been longing for were finally happening. She had found balance, something she never thought was possible while managing the vast empire her father had handed down to her. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't rushing from one meeting to the next or managing endless projects. She had taken a step back, and in doing so, she had found clarity. Elena walked over to the window and looked out at the city. The view from her penthouse was breathtaking. The hustle and bustle of the world below seemed so far away. She had spent so many years trying to conquer the world, and now, it was time to let go of the need to control everything. The empire was still hers to lead, but she no longer felt the pressure to dominate every part of her life. That wasn't what mattered anymore. What mattered was living in the present, making decisions that aligned with who she truly was. The world had seen her strength, her resilience, but now, she was beginning to show them a different side, one that didn't need to prove anything to anyone. She had already achieved more than most people could ever dream of, but now, she was learning that the most important thing was peace within herself. Later that day, Elena made her way to her favorite cafe, the one she had always visited when she wanted to get away from the world. The cafe was small and cozy, with warm lighting and soft music playing in the background. It was the perfect place to relax and reflect. As she sat at a corner table, sipping her coffee, she felt a sense of contentment wash over her. It was as if the weight of the world had been lifted from her shoulders. She wasn't just the woman who inherited her father's empire anymore. She was Elena, a woman who had found herself again. A woman who had chosen her own path. It was a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. After spending some time in the cafe, Elena decided to take a walk through the park. The weather was perfect, mild with a slight breeze, and the park was filled with families and joggers enjoying the sunshine. As she walked along the path, she noticed the little things she had overlooked before, the sound of birds chirping, the laughter of children playing, and the simple joy of being surrounded by nature. It was a stark contrast to the high-pressure world she had lived in for so long. For the first time, she felt truly free. She wasn't thinking about the empire or the next big deal. She wasn't worrying about what others thought of her. She was just being. As she continued to walk, she realized that this was what she had been missing all along. It wasn't the power or the wealth that defined her, it was her ability to live in the moment, to enjoy the little things that made life beautiful. That evening, as Elena sat in her apartment, reflecting on the day, she knew that this was only the beginning. She had made the choice to live for herself, to build a life that was not defined by expectations or the pressure to succeed. She was in control, but this time, she wasn't chasing anything. She was simply living, and in doing so, she had found something far more valuable than any empire: peace of mind. The future was still hers to shape, but now, Elena knew that she didn't have to do it alone. She had already accomplished more than anyone could have imagined, and she was ready to see where life would take her next, on her terms. Elena had never felt this level of peace before. As she sat in her favorite cafe the next morning, sipping her coffee, the world outside seemed to move at a slower pace, almost like time had finally slowed down for her. The decision to take a step back had brought more clarity than she could have ever imagined. The whirlwind of the last few months, the empire, the battles, the pressure to succeed, had all faded into the background, leaving her with a sense of calm she hadn't known in years. As she looked around the cafe, she saw the everyday things that had once seemed insignificant now seemed beautiful to her. The laughter of the barista as he joked with a customer, the clink of the coffee cup against the saucer, the quiet hum of conversation. These small, fleeting moments were what she had missed while being caught up in the rush of life. She had spent so much time thinking about the future, about what others expected of her, that she had forgotten to be present in the now. It was a realization that hit her with the force of a revelation. She wasn't just a businesswoman, a daughter, or a woman trying to prove something. She was a person with desires, dreams, and a future that was hers to shape, not for anyone else. And as the days went by, Elena began to embrace this new version of herself, someone who could still build an empire, but on her own terms. It wasn't about proving she could do it better than anyone else. It was about finding joy in the process, in the journey. She began to think about the kind of life she wanted to lead, not just in terms of success, but in terms of fulfillment. That meant making time for herself, something she had neglected for far too long. One afternoon, Elena sat at her desk in her office, reviewing some new business proposals. She had a meeting later that day with a group of investors, and she wanted to be fully prepared. But instead of feeling the usual rush of stress, she felt a sense of ease. The deals, the numbers, they no longer overwhelmed her. She was in control, but this time, it wasn't about taking over every aspect of her life. It was about balance. As she looked over the contracts in front of her, she thought about the kind of legacy she wanted to leave behind. It wasn't enough to be remembered for wealth or power. She wanted to be remembered for her integrity, her ability to inspire others, and her willingness to lift others up along the way. She had learned from her father that true success wasn't just about what you built, but about the impact you had on others. That evening, Elena made a call to one of her old friends, someone she had lost touch with over the years. It was a simple act, but it felt significant. Reconnecting with the people who had been there for her before the empire, before the chaos, felt like a reminder of who she truly was. She wasn't just a leader or a businesswoman. She was someone who valued relationships, who wanted to create meaningful connections. As the conversation with her friend unfolded, Elena realized that the path she had been on for so long had led her to this moment. She had fought to build something that she thought would bring her happiness. But now, she understood that happiness wasn't something to be built, it was something to be found. And she was finding it, piece by piece, with every step she took toward this new life. Elena hung up the phone and sat back in her chair, a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. She was finally in a place where she could breathe, where the world wasn't rushing her forward. She had found peace, and with it, a new sense of purpose. The future was still hers to shape, but now, it wasn't about being the best. It was about being the best version of herself. And for the first time in years, she was ready to embrace it. Elena woke up to the soft glow of morning light filtering through the curtains. For the first time in a long time, there was no sense of urgency. No meetings to rush to, no pressing emails demanding her attention. She had taken the time to pause, to breathe, and to allow herself to just be. Her father's empire was still in her hands, and the future was still hers to shape, but the pressure to control everything had lifted. The last few weeks had been transformative. Elena had been on a journey of self-discovery, one that had begun with stepping back from the demands of her empire, and realizing that life was about more than just success. It was about balance, about finding meaning in the moments in between the hustle. As she got out of bed and began her morning routine, Elena reflected on how much she had changed. She had gone from a woman driven by the need to prove herself to someone who now understood the importance of taking care of herself. The strength that had once come from fighting for control now came from embracing the flow of life and trusting herself. After breakfast, Elena decided to take a walk through the park, a habit she had developed in the last few weeks. It was a simple thing, but it had become a source of peace for her. She loved watching the leaves sway in the breeze, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face, and listening to the sounds of children playing. It reminded her of how much she had been missing by focusing only on the future. During her walk, Elena ran into an old friend, someone she had not seen in years. They greeted each other with smiles and chatted about life. It was easy, natural, and Elena felt a sense of gratitude for the simplicity of the moment. This was the life she had been craving. As the conversation turned to family and old memories, Elena felt a deep sense of connection to the person she had once been. The young woman with dreams and aspirations who had yet to build her empire, who had yet to feel the weight of expectations bearing down on her. She remembered a time when she had laughed freely, when her days had been less about meeting deadlines and more about finding joy in the little things. That person was still inside her, she realized. And she wanted to nurture that part of herself again. Elena and her friend parted ways. After a while, both promising to stay in touch. As Elena continued her walk, she realized that this moment was exactly what she needed. It was time to reconnect with her roots, to remind herself of the person she was before everything became about success and power. Her empire was important, yes, but so was her well-being. She didn't have to choose between the two. It was all about balance. As she returned to her apartment, Elena felt a quiet confidence. She had always believed that her worth was defined by what she achieved, but now she understood that her worth was defined by how she lived. She didn't have to prove anything to anyone anymore. She had already built her legacy. Now, it was time to build a life that made her feel whole. Elena smiled to herself as she walked through the door. She had learned a valuable lesson in the past few months, that true strength came from within, and it was found in moments of peace, not in moments of constant striving. And with that realization, Elena knew she was finally ready to live her life on her own terms, without the weight of expectation holding her back. As the days went by, Elena began to feel the weight of her decisions start to settle in a way that felt both comforting and empowering. She had built something extraordinary, something that not only commanded respect but had the potential to change the lives of others. Yet, even with all her success, she knew deep down that her journey was about more than just power or wealth. It was about embracing the full spectrum of life, the good, the bad, and the quiet moments in between. That realization only grew stronger as she spent more time focusing on herself. With her empire secure and her vision clearer than ever, Elena found herself craving a sense of connection to the world around her, to her past, and to her future. She made more time for the people who mattered most, her friends, family, and loved ones, making sure to be present in their lives as much as they had been in hers. It wasn't always easy to balance the demands of running a business with personal relationships, but Elena had learned the importance of setting boundaries and prioritizing the things that truly brought her joy. The more she focused on these aspects of life, the more fulfilled she felt. One weekend, Elena decided to take a break from her usual routine and visit her childhood home. It was a small house on the outskirts of the city, a place that held memories of simpler times, before the weight of the world had settled on her shoulders. The house was still the same, but it felt different now. As she walked through the familiar rooms, she could feel the echoes of her past, the laughter of her parents, the quiet moments of reflection, the dreams of a young girl who had no idea what the future would hold. It was in that space that Elena felt a deep sense of peace, a peace that had eluded her for so long. She spent the weekend reminiscing and reconnecting with her roots, letting the memories of her past ground her in a way that nothing else could. The experience was cathartic, and by the time she left, Elena felt lighter. She had come to understand that her past had shaped her into the woman she was today, but it did not have to define her future. Her future was hers to create. Back in her city apartment, Elena felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had learned that success wasn't just about building empires or conquering challenges. It was about building a life that was authentic to who she truly was. With this newfound clarity, Elena decided to take her business in a new direction, one that focused not just on profit, but on making a difference. She invested in sustainable initiatives, supported causes that were close to her heart, and made sure that her success would have a positive impact on the world. Her company began to transform into something more than just a business. It became a force for good, a legacy she could be proud of. As Elena continued to grow her empire, she never lost sight of what mattered most: the people in her life, the relationships she had nurtured, and the inner peace she had worked so hard to cultivate. She had learned to embrace her power, not just to change the world, but to change herself. And in doing so, she had found something far more valuable than any business deal or financial success. She had found a life worth living.